It's October the 17th, 2020. Welcome to our weekend readings in Matthew, lessons in Matthew. We're continuing with that, and we're in chapter 24. Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. "Do you see all these things?" he asked. "I tell you the truth, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down." As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, so the disciples came to him privately. "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?" Jesus answered, "Watch out that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, claiming, 'I am the Christ,' and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Then you'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, 'Look, here is the Christ,' or 'There he is,' do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, 'There he is out in the desert,' do not go out, or 'Here he is in the inner rooms,' do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. I tell you the truth, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. No one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, and one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this: if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master's staying away a long time, and he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and at an hour he's not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Amen. Now, Matthew chapter 24 is one of the most profound and mysterious chapters in the Bible. But the opening verses 1 to 3, they give us a key to unlock what follows. In fact, there are two keys that we're given. As Jesus is talking about the temple in the opening verses and speaks, they're in the temple area, and he speaks in verse 2 about the destruction of the temple. The disciples ask a question in verse 3. Actually, there are two here. Tell us, they said, when will this happen, the destruction of the temple, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? There's two separate questions here. One is short term, the other is long term. First of all, they ask a question which is about short term things. What will be the end of their world? The question is, tell us, they said, when will this happen? And there's a short term fulfillment of this in verses 4 to 25. Now, how much is short term? How much is long term? There is a bit of an overlap. Sometimes we're not absolutely certain or clear about it. But generally speaking, I think this is how the passage works. The reference to the destruction of the temple in verse 2, that will happen in their lifetime. We know that from history. It happened in AD 70. The Romans did it. There are other very localized events that are referred to, which again are fairly short term. For example, the reference in verse 16 about those who are in Judea fleeing to the mountains. Verse 19, how dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women. Verse 20, pray that your flight will not take place a winter on the south. That seems to be very localized and very short term and very much applicable to the disciples and the first Christian community there in Jerusalem. However, other things are mentioned here. For example, verse 5, the religious deception of people claiming to be Christ, they're false prophets. Then verse 7, the international unrest, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Verse 9, the persecution of the believers. You'll be handed over to be persecuted and put to death. Now, all of those things, they certainly did happen during this early period. But these are things that have also been normal throughout the church age. These things have always happened, and they're happening right now, of course. And there might well be an intensification of these things towards the end of the age. So, we not only have the short-term fulfillment or answer to the question, the end of their world, 4 to 25, we also have the longer term and the ultimate answer and conclusion of the matter, the end of the world. Not just the end of their world, but the end of the world. And that seems to be now what we have in 26 to 41. Remember the second part of the question? They said, And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So Jesus has sort of answered the first bit of the question. Now he's moving on to the second. And indeed, in these verses, one of the key words that keeps coming up again and again is what we've just said. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky. That's what they asked. What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So he now goes on to talk about the coming, sometimes called the second coming, or the second advent, or the Lord's return. And not only the fact of it, but the signs that will indicate that it's about to happen, so we can prepare ourselves accordingly. What are some of those signs? Learn the lesson, verse 32, from the fig tree. That might be just a natural lesson, or that might be a reference, I think, more probably to Israel in the Old Testament, who's referred to in those terms. And that's very relevant. And then, again, thinking about Old Testament examples, society becoming like it was in the days of Noah, verse 37, from what you know of Noah's day and age, and from what you read here, doesn't that sound familiar? Isn't that the society that's being described in our newspapers and on headline news every day? So this is the long-term fulfillment, the coming of the Lord, and the signs to prepare ourselves for it. And that brings us finally to the punchline, verses 42 to 51, because you see, these things have been revealed not so that we might indulge in wild speculation and even get a bit obsessed by it all, looking for signs and looking for indicators and looking for this and looking for that. Sadly, Christians have always had a bit of a tendency to do that, and thereby have missed the point, because all of this is given to us in a way that is immensely practical. Verse 42, we are to keep watch. Verse 44, you must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. And verse 45, who then is the faithful and wise servant? Well, the answer to that should be you. You should be true, faithful disciples, believing these things and preparing yourselves. Because whatever else we might make of this mighty chapter, it is profound, it is mysterious. There are things here hard to be understood, maybe things we'll never plumb the depths of. But it is given to us for an immensely practical reason. There is a punchline here. There's one thing that's absolutely clear in all of this. The Lord Jesus is coming again. How do we know that? Because he said it. And verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.